Have you ever wondered, what if everything we call love is really just fear of being alone? What if the need to have someone beside us is simply a way to avoid facing the emptiness inside? And what if relationships as we know them are often just another escape from ourselves? Nothing feels more true than the discomfort we experience in solitude. Carl Jung once suggested imagining ourselves on our deathbed, the room dark, sounds fading as consciousness slowly drifts away. Then in that silence a question arises. Did you live your own life, or did you simply live alongside someone else's? At some point, most of us follow the familiar script. Find someone, fall in love, share a life, grow old together. It sounds beautiful, it feels safe. But rarely do we talk about what gets lost in that process, the dreams we abandon, the desires we silence, the parts of ourselves that fade away in the name of harmony. Slowly, the soul bends until it forgets how to stand tall. Jung knew that certain paths demand silence, solitude, and sacrifice, not of the self, but of dependency on others. Because individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are, cannot be negotiated. Truth cannot be shared with someone still afraid of their own shadow. Yet society, with its polished smiles and picture-perfect weddings, doesn't forgive. Those who choose to walk alone. You're selfish, you'll end up lonely. No one can be happy without a partner. These phrases echo like prayers. But are they true? What if fulfillment doesn't come from meeting the right person, but from becoming the person no one could ever replace? This isn't a rejection of love. It's a call to choose yourself, even if that means walking paths few dare to take. We'll explore Jung's insights, shine a light on the hidden corners of the mind, and uncover truths many avoid. Remaining single can be the most radical form of freedom, and perhaps the only way to avoid betraying yourself. From childhood, we're told to find someone who will complete us, someone who fills the quiet ache we feel at night. Culture insists you'll only be happy with another person, and if you're alone, something must be wrong. The message is subtle but persistent. Single people are labeled incomplete, broken, flawed, as if solitude itself were a failure. But what if the opposite is true? What if the need to love is just a form of escape? A shield to protect us from meeting ourselves face to face, without masks, without distractions. Jung recognized what most still resist. Many people don't actually love. They cling. They use others as protection from their own existence. That is the real illusion of romantic love, the belief that another person will save us from ourselves. At first it feels like purpose and warmth, but slowly changes begin. You adjust an opinion to avoid conflict, you silence a desire, you give up a habit, you call it compromise, you call it partnership, but piece by piece you start to disappear. Until one day, you no longer know who you are. Jung did not reject love itself. He rejected surrender. The surrender of autonomy, creativity, and the necessary chaos of becoming whole. Romantic love, as society defines it, often demands fusion. Two people merging into one identity built on dependence. But that fusion kills what is most valuable: creative chaos. True individuality is only possible in solitude. This truth is difficult to bear because solitude requires courage, while being with someone often provides a comfortable distraction. The issue isn't relationships themselves, it's the psychological price we quietly pay to maintain the illusion of completeness. Many couples appear peaceful, but beneath the surface are concessions that cost fragments of the soul. Desires buried, silences that hide truths, marriages that function less as partnerships and more as survival contracts. Jung warned that such arrangements can become cages, where the will for self-realization fades and love transforms into a prison, decorated with flowers and promises. Think about it. Can an artist create in constant noise? Can you truly dive into your own thoughts while constantly managing someone else's emotions? The soul needs space to expand. Yet love, in practice, often demands containment, negotiations over meals, schedules, choices, a constant internal committee deciding whether your decisions fit within the relationship's limits. It is draining. And behind it all hides a dangerous belief that your worth depends on belonging to a couple. Jung saw this as a serious illusion. He warned against projecting onto others the qualities we deny in ourselves: sensitivity, tenderness, intuition. In doing so, we fragment ourselves and call it love. But real love doesn't ask you to vanish. It doesn't require you to dim your light or hide your pain just to keep peace. The love Jung defended was different. Amor fati, the love of one's own destiny, one's own path, life itself with all its chaos. And it begins when you stop seeking outside what can only be found within. You don't need someone to complete you. You need courage to face yourself, to walk alone, even when the world insists that solitude is failure. Because it is within chosen solitude that integrity is born. The search for wholeness in another person weakens us. It distracts us from our most important task, becoming whole on our own. So perhaps the real question is this: do you truly want to love someone, or are you simply trying to avoid yourself? And there's something more you should know. Have you ever noticed that the moment you most need calm is when your mind collapses? That loss of control isn't just emotional, it's mental. It happens because we were taught to feel before thinking, to react before observing. The problem is structural. We never learned to train the mind like a muscle. That's why minor frustrations turn into explosions, and small challenges feel like defeat. But there is another way, a framework rooted in neuroscience, practical philosophy, and quiet mental techniques. Methods that retrain how you respond and place you back in control. Freedom has always carried a price, and very few are willing to pay it. The idea of being free sounds noble and inspiring, but when reality arrives, cold, uncertain, and without guarantees, most retreat to the safety of the familiar. Carl Jung understood this better than most. He knew that true freedom requires giving up what the world values most: belonging, acceptance, and emotional comfort. Solitude is not a lifestyle trend or an aesthetic choice. It is a psychological battlefield where the fragile often break. 2. Be free means facing the mirror without masks, distractions, or excuses. Very few are prepared to do this. Instead, most live inside emotional bubbles filled with validation, diversions, and commitments that only serve to cover the silence with noise. For Jung, solitude was never a punishment, but a necessary condition. It was the ground from which a person could rise above the average, no longer a domesticated, reactive conformist, but instead a creator of personal values. This is what he called the individuated self, one who has transcended herd mentality. And no one achieves this surrounded by comfort and constant approval. The freedom Jung described demands separation from the herd, and separation always brings loss. You lose friends, partners, and the sense of predictability that comes with belonging, but in return, you gain yourself. Jung lived this reality fully. His solitude was not accidental but intentional. He immersed himself in his inner world, writing, walking and confronting his own thoughts, even to the edge of sanity. His writings reveal someone who knew pain, yet chose to continue, because for him, the pain of isolation was preferable to the mediocrity of blind conformity. He saw society as a stage of masks, marriages, conventions, and convenient friendships, all designed to shield people from the deeper, often frightening truths of existence. Jung wanted more. He sought what lay hidden beneath centuries of illusion, and for that he required silence. Solitude became that silence. Without it, a person merely repeats what they hear and reacts to others' expectations. They live as reflections, not as authentic beings. But solitude is not the same as suffering. It is not rejection, nor the bitterness of being left behind. It is a choice, a sacred space where thought develops, where consciousness reorganizes, where inner chaos begins to take shape. Jung reminded us that enlightenment does not come from imagining light, but by making darkness conscious. That darkness does not appear in social gatherings or weekend outings. It emerges only when one is fully alone, without distractions or rescue. It is there that authentic philosophical thought is born. Yet solitude is demanding. It requires an emotional strength that modern society does not teach. Today, we live in constant connection, oversharing and exposure of our most private moments. Never have people been so surrounded, and yet never have they felt so empty. Silence terrifies because it forces us to hear what we have long avoided. Jung knew that not everyone was ready for this path. He saw philosophers, creators, and solitary artists as exceptions, a rare deviation. Most people do not truly want freedom. They want direction. They prefer someone else to tell them what to do, what to feel, and how to live. For the unprepared, real freedom is unbearable. That is why when someone begins to withdraw, they are judged. Others say they have changed, become strange, or that they need companionship. What they fail to see is that such individuals are not seeking people. They are seeking depth, truth, silence, and the sound of their own thoughts until those thoughts speak something worth following. Freedom requires renunciation. You give up the comfort of someone waiting at home, the shared life plan, the automatic affection. Yet in that renunciation, something else is revealed: power. You become independent, untamable, and resistant to control. Nothing can be used against you because you no longer depend on belonging. Jung himself was often called mad, misunderstood, and even rejected. But he remained loyal to his path. He did not live to please others. He lived to uncover truth, to challenge illusions, and to disturb complacency. A life of full freedom does not fit into traditional molds or relationships built on emotional contracts. Total freedom means being willing to cross deserts without company, without a map, and without promises of rescue. This is why Jung never romanticized solitude. He saw it as a method of purification, a weapon of clarity. You begin to understand who you truly are only when you no longer need to please others, explain your steps, or justify your choices. In that unfiltered space, a difficult truth becomes clear. Freedom costs everything that once kept you comfortable, but it is the price of becoming whole rather than a softened version of yourself. Marriage is often presented as the ultimate fulfillment of adult life. A happy ending, a final achievement, the symbol of being complete. But behind the smiling photos and romantic captions lies another reality, a truth heavier, rawer, and seldom spoken. For many, marriage feels less like celebration and more like containment. It signals not expansion, but closure. The journey of discovery ends, possibilities narrow, and growth is interrupted. Carl Jung understood this clearly. Traditional marriage thrives on predictability, repetition, habit, routine, and comfort. Yet the creative mind requires the opposite: uncertainty, silence, and even discomfort. Nothing extraordinary emerges from perfectly ordered soil. Stability may build homes, but it can suffocate ideas. Consider a man with a vision, a mission that drives him restlessly forward. Such a person needs focus, time, and undivided energy. Now imagine him married, burdened by daily obligations, emotional negotiations, and endless discussions over small matters. The hidden cost is steep. Every step must be explained, every decision approved, every change debated. The creative spark does not vanish suddenly but fades slowly. What once was urgency becomes scheduling. Restlessness is replaced by consensus. Deep truths shrink under the silent agreement not to disturb the peace. At this stage, many surrender. They trade their vocation for domestic harmony, smiling outwardly while knowing something essential has been lost. Jung would say, "It is the will to self-realization that dies. The vital force of creation and transcendence is tamed by the constant need to please." Traditional marriage often demands continuous performance, being emotionally available, filtering thoughts, moderating. Dreams becoming half of a project, half of a home, half of a life. But Jung rejected halves. He believed in wholeness, in individuals who choose completeness even at the cost of disapproval. For those born to create, compromise feels like a sentence. Great ideas require solitude, mental clarity, and freedom from splitting energy between creation and dinner plans. The golden cage may be safe, beautiful, and filled with affection, but it remains a cage. Those who seek to create something greater than themselves cannot live behind bars, no matter how comfortable. Jung knew this firsthand. His most powerful work was not born in cozy domestic afternoons, but in solitude, silent mountains, long nights, fevered writing. It was in isolation that he produced ideas still challenging the world today. So ask yourself, how many ideas have you abandoned to keep peace? How many projects have you shelved because they didn't fit into a relationship's rhythm? How many truths have you silenced to preserve comfort? Modern marriage, even when offering companionship, often shapes us into something manageable. And for a restless mind, that marks the beginning of symbolic death. The cost is subtle but relentless. It creeps in when you avoid a subject, delay a plan, or choose silence and call it love. But often, it is not love, it is fear. Fear of rejection, fear of losing stability, fear of standing alone. Jung did not seek companions to complete him. He sought thinkers, people willing to dismantle themselves, suffer intellectually, and rebuild into something new. That requires freedom. Freedom from the fear of disturbing others, from smoothing out one's edges, from always needing someone by your side. As it exists today, marriage often stifles that freedom. It acts as an emotional contract with hidden terms, silence, compromise, postponed dreams, all in exchange for stability. But must stability always be a virtue? Jung would argue otherwise. Perhaps instability is what fuels the soul. Perhaps solitude, even with its intensity, is more honest than smiling beside someone who cannot grasp your depth. Here many retreat, choosing to adapt, remain, and surrender. Yet a few walk away. They choose the quiet room, the solitary path, the shadow as company, and in that choice, something new is born, not comfortable peace, but raw integrity, the kind that needs no justification. Marriage can indeed be beautiful, but for some, it is too beautiful not to be dangerous. When greatness is at stake, the cage's beauty does not outweigh freedom's price. A mind that seeks creation requires space, even danger. And almost no one speaks of this. People talk of innovation and creativity, but rarely admit the price. Solitude. Awareness transforms solitude into revelation. In being alone, no one dictates the pace of thought. No external expectations, no borrowed emotions, no need to moderate intensity. It is only you, your mind, and the space between what exists and what could be. Jung understood this with clarity. The absence of bonds was not a rejection of love, but a method, a way to keep ideas pure, free from compromise. Because relationships, no matter how affectionate, always bring interference, too many emotions, too many opinions, too much noise, all. That emotional weight is a constant call to moderation, to softening, to self-censorship. Yet radical thought, the kind that truly reshapes the world, does not emerge in places where existence requires permission. It is born in silence, in hours unseen, in moments that demand no explanation. When living alone, the mind breathes differently. It stretches, experiments with unusual ideas, and makes connections that would be dismissed or censored if spoken aloud. At times it feels exaggerated, even inappropriate, and that is precisely where its power lies. Einstein did not develop his theories at crowded dinner tables. Tesla did not shape the foundations of modern electricity while mediating household disputes. Camus did not wrestle with the absurd while worrying about a partner's approval. These figures chose isolation not out of arrogance, but necessity, understanding that certain ideas require a protected space, free from emotional interference and social expectation. A liberated, creative mind is unpredictable, unsettling, often transgressive, and rarely compatible with ordinary relationships. Imagine pausing an intricate line of thought just to settle a domestic argument, ease an insecurity, or explain a delayed reply. Such interruptions may seem small, but they corrode focus. The thought vanishes, the energy scatters, and the idea dies before it takes form. This cycle repeats constantly in marriages and relationships, unnoticed, until mediocrity becomes accepted as the price of love. Carl Jung described it as a slow poison, the gradual dilution of will. The solitary creator rejects this bargain. He chooses another path, to rise and think until the mind burns, to write without a clock, to erase yesterday's work and begin again, without explaining his process to anyone. In this context, solitude is not emptiness but fuel, an open space where fire never dies because no one demands it be tempered. Of course, solitude carries a cost. There will be no one waiting in the living room, no shared dinners or holiday rituals. One may be viewed as strange, distant, or eccentric, but in return comes something irreplaceable: the freedom to think as far as the soul can go. Jung saw this not as sacrifice, but as mission, to explore the unthinkable, feel the unbearable, walk to the edge of humanity, and return with something new. Such a task requires a free mind, and a free mind cannot exist bound by the need for external approval. This is not about rejecting love, but about recognizing that even the most beautiful bonds can suffocate the flame that must remain alive. You have felt it before, when an idea was delayed because someone else needed you in that moment, when writing was interrupted by a conversation or emotion that demanded attention. Each time, something was lost. A piece of yourself. The solitary creator learns to guard that space like a monk guards his temple, knowing that greatness is quiet, fleeting, and leaves if unwelcomed. The free mind is wild. It requires space, sleepless nights, and unstructured mornings. It does not conform to shared calendars or apartments built for two. It seeks to overflow, to burn, to destroy, and rebuild. Above all, it seeks silence, for only in silence can chaos take shape, and only in solitude can thought become truth. At some point, you must decide whose life you are truly living, not in theory, but in practice. Many claim freedom while living as subjects of others' expectations, filtering every choice through fear of judgment, rejection, or loneliness. Choosing yourself is more than courage. It is a quiet act of rebellion, a refusal to negotiate integrity. Jung recognized that such a choice carries consequences. When you place yourself at the center of your own existence, everything built on convenience begins to unravel. People drift away, plans collapse, relationships dissolve. What remains is you, unbound, free, and whole. Most people do not want this level of freedom. They want a safer version, one softened with comfort, affection, and reassurance. But real freedom is raw, empty, and risky. It does not come with applause, only silence and the full weight of responsibility for every choice. True sovereignty is not about ruling others. It is about refusing to be ruled. Not by culture, not by fear, not by lack. You know you are on this path when you no longer seek approval, when you live without asking permission, when you learn to say no without guilt, when you decide to walk alone even if everyone insists you are wrong. That choice feels frightening and isolating, yet it also sets you free, because you begin to see something few ever mention. The life you want does not fit into the molds you were given. To live it, you must break expectations, disappoint others, and step away from the version of yourself they imagined. This is the point where many people turn back. They return to safe relationships, predictable jobs, and plans that keep the peace. They call it balance, but deep down, they know it is surrender. Carl Jung once said, "Become who you are," yet no one teaches how. Because to truly become yourself, you must give up the safety of being who others approve of. It means placing yourself at the center of your own life without fearing labels like selfish. Real selfishness is not thinking of yourself. It is expecting others to think and decide for you. When someone chooses themselves, they stop blaming others for their unhappiness. They stop waiting to be rescued. They don't need to be fully understood to keep moving forward. They are enough for themselves. And that unsettles others, because someone who is enough does not bend. They don't need approval to belong, agreement to be loved, or pretense to fit in. That person is powerful because they are free. In a world built on dependence, a free person is a disruption. Choosing yourself is like leaping into the unknown, not from impulse, but from clarity, understanding that staying where you are means slowly dying while calling it living. Accepting emotional scraps in exchange for company, trading freedom for safety. That is not life, it is survival dressed as routine. Jung did not ask you to chase happiness, he asked you to seek wholeness. Even if that means losing the things that now bring you comfort, because only when comfort is gone do you discover your real strength. At that point, solitude no longer feels like emptiness. It becomes the ground where your will takes root, where your vision grows, and where your existence gains meaning. The one who chooses themselves does not need validation. They only need loyalty to one thing, their own truth, even if it costs them love, even if it places them against the world. Because in the end, the deepest act of love is refusing to abandon yourself. If you've listened this far, it already tells you something. Somewhere inside, you knew the life sold to you through promises and stability was not meant for you. Maybe you tried, maybe you're still trying, but something within stays restless, reminding you there is more. And there is. But that more is not in finding someone, it is in becoming someone. Someone who does not need approval to breathe, someone who can stand alone without breaking, someone who builds their existence not for acceptance, but for truth. Jung once said, "He who has a why can bear almost any how, but that why reveals itself only when you silence the world around you. That silence demands courage, letting go, and leaving behind the comforts that kept your soul asleep." The world is not designed for your freedom, it is designed for your adaptation. Yet there comes a moment when adapting feels like dying slowly. At that point, you have two options. Return to normality and pretend this message never reached you, or take the risk of living without owing anything to anyone, carrying only one loyalty. The loyalty of never betraying yourself. Had to spend a long time alone to understand this. Not the kind of loneliness filled with distractions, apps, or noise, but a deeper solitude that silences everything. I remember one night clearly. It was raining and I sat on the floor against the cold wall, not out of drama, but exhaustion. For the first time, I did not want anyone, not someone to talk to, not someone to save me. I only wanted to listen to myself, to understand myself, to rebuild myself. And in that raw moment I realized I was whole, wounded but whole, alone but free, afraid but honest. And from there, life began to make sense. If this message found you, it is not by chance. Life does not deliver such words to those still asleep. It whispers them only to those who are already waking up. If these words spoke to you, I invite you to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss the next step in your own journey of self-discovery. Because in the end, the greatest act of love is to never abandon yourself.